Thank you all for being here for the first of 3 lectures in the summer lecture series by the Friends of the Aiken County Historic Museum.
And now a word from our sponsor. Our sponsor tonight is Downtown Dental and the law firm Johnson, Lancer, Little, and Staggs. And we do have one of our sponsors present tonight, Charlotte Wiedemann of Downtown Dental. Stand, please, Charlotte. Thank you so much. And now back to our program.
All right, again, this is the first of the lectures that are about streets and parkways and roads and things in Aiken. But this one is going to be about the Wild West. You didn't know you were coming to the Wild West, did you? This is going to be about the alley and how we got the alley we know today. So, any of you ever go down to the alley? Yeah, yeah, big laugh there. Of course, and we all love the alley that we can see today. It's a wonderful place. In fact, I would argue that it has become the heart of downtown Aiken. Would anyone agree? Yeah. So, it was not always quite that way. It really was more like the Wild West. Back in the 1800s, it wasn't called the alley with capital letters. It was called Boneyard Alley. And Boneyard Alley applied to both what we now have as the alley and Bee Lane. Boneyard Alley. And that's where on every Monday, the local citizens and the rural folk gathered to do some horse trading. They brought in their horses. Sometimes they brought in carts and things to trade or to get fixed. But they would gather there on Mondays. And every Tuesday, the newspaper would talk about whether it had been a big day in Boneyard Alley or a quiet day in Boneyard Alley. Now, let's go back there. You can see right there, there are horse sheds, permanent horse sheds in Boneyard Alley because they're using it all the time for that. And on maps of the time, it actually showed the horse sheds. They're right there. They're actually labeled horse sheds on the map. I had to write it in bigger letters so you could actually read it. But this is the alley, and this is Bee Lane today. And there are the horse sheds. So they are doing all their horse trading back in there. Here is an illustration from Harper's Weekly in 1900, and it was labeled Horse Trading Day in Aiken. That's how we were known up north, apparently. Now, what you can notice in here is that they are racing the horses up and down. And they're trying to show them off, show what they can do. Well, this became a bit of a problem because poor Mr. Henderson, who has a nice store on Lawrence Street, the people who are racing the horses are spilling out onto Lawrence Street and threatening the pedestrians. So every Monday morning, he'd have to go out there and block the alley at Lawrence Street so that the pedestrians were safe. Now, Boneyard Alley. Lauren Virgo, the museum manager, and I have researched this endlessly. Where did the name Boneyard Alley come from? Because boneyard usually means a place you send things that are no longer used. Maybe that's where you send ships. They call it a boneyard. That's where you send bodies. Clearly, this place is not where you send dead things or things that can no longer be used. There's one newspaper article in the 1890s that says it's Raw Bone Day in Boneyard Alley. No idea what that means. We really have no idea where the name Boneyard Alley comes from. But we did develop a theory because we wondered where the name Bee Lane came from. And we decided that that B stood for boneyard, that when they got rid of the idea of Boneyard Alley, they called it Bee Lane. That was a really great idea until we found a map we hadn't seen from 1855. In this 1855 map, here's Lawrence, there's Richland, Curve Street. By the way, Hain was called Curve Street back then. And this little alley, the one that we call the alley today, is called B's Lane, B-E-E''S, as if it belongs to someone named B. We have no idea who this could be. Doesn't show up in any records. So the name B Lane came much earlier, so I don't think it had anything to do with Boneyard. Someday maybe we'll figure it out. Now, Boneyard Alley was a wild place. So you had all the people with the horses and mules and carriages. You had some carpenter shops back there, wheelwright. There was a wagon factory for a while. They had a billiards hall there, several restaurants, a couple of places that you could dispense alcohol, and it was as unsavory as you might expect with all of that. And here's just one example: a death in a gambling den. Dramatic. Harvey Jackson shot and killed by Bob Pearson over a game of poker. And that was on the alley. So maybe because it was so wild back there, they decided to relocate the police station. It had been down kind of on Park, and they moved it up onto the alley. So anyone here grow up here and remember the police station on the alley? Yeah. The police station, you know, everybody else who didn't grow up here, you see the police arch now. And there's the police arch that we just see the arch because the police station's gone. But the police station ends up being on the alley from 1909 to 1976, and they added a calaboose to the police station. Does anyone know what a calaboose is? A jail. Yeah, so the jail is on the alley as well. And in fact, Alan Riddick interviewed several people, and one of them was Mrs. Adams. She grew up in Aiken, and she remembers every week her daddy would bring her down to the alley to get fish at Charlie's Fish Market, which was also on the alley. And they would walk on the alley, and it was very, very scary because the prisoners would be up on the second floor of the jail running their tin cups along the bars and shouting, "Help me, help me," and probably much worse things than that she did not share. So it was kind of scary there on the alley. And look at those bars there. I think Todd there was just telling me, you got some of those? Yeah. So some of those bars are still around Aiken. Well, the city decided that if, having Boneyard Alley wasn't really the image they wanted to convey. And shortly after 1900, this whole horse trading thing started dying out. It wasn't until 1931, though, that the city passed a law banning horse trading within the city limits. So we could have been doing it until 1930. So other things spring up in the alley. You had barber shops, you had small restaurants, the stove place, dry cleaners. Something that really helped a lot is most of the buildings on the alley in B Lane had been wood, and in 1921 there was another one of those devastating fires that Aiken has all the time, and it took out most of those wooden buildings, including, sadly, the dispensary. That was kind of good, though, because Prohibition had just started, and they replaced them with brick buildings. But it still wasn't a very fancy place. By 1940, they added on, so the old Muni building that had been there, the Grand Opera, had burned down, and in the 1930s, they built a new city hall and a big municipal hall behind it. Does anyone remember that, when there was a big municipal hall? I see it, yeah. Well, they had fights there every Thursday night. They staged regular boxing matches that, the boxers were paid in prize money, people paid to go, And they were doing that right there on the alley in that building. And Willie Upson there, who was one of the fighters, he remembers, fighting there, and they'd do their fight, and then they'd go across the way to the pool hall, get a couple things to drink, go back and fight again. Yeah, I'm sure that was a really lively time. Charlie's Fish Market was on the alley. Now, does anyone remember Charlie's Fish Market on the alley? All right. If you have not been to Charlie's new location, and I say new since the early 80s, up on Richland, the best fish ever. You really should go to Charlie's Fish Market. So Charlie's Fish Market was on the alley. And, just to give you a flavor for probably the smell of the alley, Charlie only brings in fresh fish from the coast. They still do. And when you order a fish, for a fish sandwich or to take with, they gut it and clean it right there. Now they have an actual building where they do that. Back then, they went out into a little alley behind their building that was right on the alley, and they gutted and cleaned it and just hoped it was washed down to the sewer. Can you imagine what that must have been like? They operated there for 20 years doing that. There was Alexander's grocery store. Now, Alexander was Greek. And this wonderful lady, Stephanie Hewitt, had sent me an email telling me her memories of Alexander's grocery store. And James Alexander is a wonderful Greek with a heavy accent. And we'd go there to visit. He made wonderful hot dogs, told great stories, was always willing to give us a Coke. Did anyone here ever go to Alexander's Market or remember it? Oh, no one's quite old enough. Okay. I need an older crowd. Anyone remember Leverett's shoe store when it was on the alley? Oh, yeah. That was...
Before that.
Pardon?
It was a pharmacy before that.
Oh, okay. And it had a big fire, which you're going to get to hear a little about more. So Leverett's shoe store was on the alley. And a lot of people have told me stories about, going there, the week before school started for their mom to get them their new shoes for school. And there's a picture from 1966. This is from Lawrence Street. And you can just see Leverett's right behind there. It's the little blue and white sign. Can you see that? There's Leverett's. Yes, Sam.
That was not 66, because that's my mother.
Ah, okay. Alan thought it was 66.
Now history now. That was probably 80, 1980.
Wow. And it still looked that bad. Okay. Not your mom, the alley. The alley. Thank you. Yeah, I got that from Alan Riddick, and he thought it was from the 60s. Okay. Hi, Mom. Does anyone remember Birdsies? Yeah, Birdsies. This is the far end of the alley. So you're standing on Newberry looking towards the alley there. And Birdsies Market was there. Across from it there is the building that today is the really cool building that's got taco sushi and the axe throwing place and everything. It was a grocery warehouse. The main entrance was on Newberry, and there weren't all sorts of storefronts there along the alley back then. It was pretty much mostly a big brick wall. There was Bob Morgan, 25 years a barber on the alley. He became famous. I mean, everybody knew Bob and his elite barber shop. So the alley has shops. I mean, reputable shops like Leverett's and everything, but it also has a reputation for being a bit disreputable. People tell me that they didn't let their kids go there and play. Nice women didn't just stroll there, but it had a lot of stores, many of them owned by black people or Greek, who, by the way, were treated like they were color and that they were black people. I've heard about this a lot now. And it was the black shopping district. So you had Lawrence Street, the white shopping area, but the alley was considered the black shopping area. And I heard that from people, and I thought, well, but Mr. Alvanos did an interview. And what he remembers, there was Alvanos restaurant downtown. And on Saturdays, he was sent into town on the bus with the family's maid, Hattie Mae. And he would go to the restaurant to work, and Hattie Mae would go to the alley to do her shopping because that was the black shopping day. I also stumbled on this wonderful drawing out at Charlie's Fish Market. It's up on the wall there. It was done by the grandson of the shoemaker who was on B Lane. And it illustrates the alley in the 1970s. You have Charlie's Fish Market there, you have a pool hall there, the police station is still there in the corner. And what it says on the bottom, and I've put up above, he titled it Saturday on the Town, the Alley, a Black Haven. So this was the alley up until 1980. It's got some reputable businesses, but it's also got a bit of a disreputable air. A story that is told by many people is that it had a pool hall, it had some drinking establishments, and Friday and Saturday nights, the men would go to the pool hall, then they'd go drinking, they'd come stumbling out, and the police would be there to take them to the jail. And young man, the grandson of Marie out at Charlie's, said that, oh yeah, they called it the Triangle. It was just like a standard thing. And his grandparents would actually get up at midnight to get the vats of fish oil going, because then the men needed some fish when they got out of jail early in the morning. Yeah. Well, we're going to go back here because it is time for me to turn this over to Sam Erb. If you don't know him, you should. Sam started the West Side Bowery, one of the most popular places ever in the alley area. So he's going to tell you more about that and how he made this huge difference in the evolution of the alley.
Thank y'all very much. I want to thank Linda. She did a great job putting this together for us, and Dennis Harkin for helping put this all together for us. But anyway, and I want to thank a lot of y'all, because a lot of y'all were my customers back then, so I want to thank you. But the very first day we opened in 1981, April 18th of 1981, we served 38 people for lunch. My father said they were brave souls because we took this picture. That's what that building looked like when I rented it for $1 for a year. Our first year was $1 because of the condition of it. And of course this was Park Avenue right here. This was the corner, Park and B Lane. That's what it looked like. It was rough. I had to take that paint off of that pillar, as a matter of fact. But if I can back up, see that pool hall? And you mentioned that pool hall is my restaurant. And the police used to call it the Bloody Bucket because every Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, there was a stabbing, a fight, or something. And they would go over there, grab them by the hand, and throw them into jail. This is what the building, what we rented. That's another picture of Leverett's. It was all boarded up at that time. This picture on the left side was when we were in the midst of starting the main construction of the whole building, which it is today. But we'll elaborate on that later. This dental work right here that you see in a lot of these pictures, that dental work didn't match the rest of the building. I don't know if we have a picture of what it actually looks like. This, is there a pointer on this? Is it the very top? Right? Right there. That dental work right there is what I extended all the way to the end. We did away with that because it was almost rotted. But to make it look like one whole building, which was this. My sister actually did this for us for the city, with a rendition of what it was going to look like. Of course, that was our first bar right there. Back then we had mini bottles and such. I'm going to have to go on here on my notes so I don't forget things that Linda wanted me to. Let's see. Now we had, well, let me back up. Smitty's building, there was a picture of Smitty's building in here. This was Smitty's building. It had burned and gutted before Smitty actually took control of it, bought it. I walked around there when we first signed the deal for $1 a year, and he had a bunch of boots out there, and I bought a pair of boots for $5. And those boots, had burn mark on them, and I wore those boots renovating that restaurant. That was the cheapest pair of boots Smitty ever sold, I will tell you that much. Sorry, Smitty, I had to throw that in there. Let's see, there's other. And talking about Smitty, I have to share this story. Smitty used to run a lot and in marathons, and he ran in the New York Marathon. And our first restaurant, our first menu, we would offer a special every day. And one time we had liver and onions, and Smitty said, "I love liver and onions." So I said, "Well, I'll always tell you when we're having liver and onions." And this one day, after he ran the New York Marathon, he didn't win, but we decided to give Smitty a ticker tape parade of his own. So I got shredded paper and an electric blower. I went up on the roof, and Donna, my wife, called Smitty and said, "We're having liver and onions." He said, "I'll be there at noon." Sure enough, I saw him come around. I hit the blower and gave Smitty his own ticker tape parade. So that was something. When I first walked in this building, it was awful. It was awful. We had a window. It was actually two sections of building. Let me see one of these. No. It was actually two sections, and this is one section, and this is another section. That was the actual first front door there. But on the second section, there was a window all the way in the back. And I said, "What in the world is that?" Well, halfway up the window were half-pint liquor bottles. And what it was, people would go to the liquor store, get their half-pint, guzzle it, and then throw it over a fence there. And that's where it would end up. And how many years they threw those liquor bottles in there, but I cleaned it up. So it was a little rough to start, and we made it happen. Blood, sweat, and tears. That was our first bar. Let's see, this was in the construction of, we expanded a couple times where we were until we finally went all the way to Park Avenue. And when you said the Greek, there was a lot of, that rest of that building was owned by the Varini's family, and the Varini's family sold it to us. Excuse me. They sold it to Bettis Rainsford first. And I said, oh my goodness, why would they sold it? They should have sold it to us. So we didn't have anywhere to expand. So we bought the brick barn out there, which is the carriage barn today. That's all renovated and everything. And thinking we were going to put our restaurant there as we grew. That didn't happen, fortunately. But the Vrains family did tell Bettis, said, when you ever sell it, give the Herbs a chance to buy it. And that happened. And we bought it. And in gutting that part of that building to Park Avenue, all the interior brick, by the way, had stucco on it, and we had to knock that stucco off with axes. It was, I was in good shape when I finished. It took a while, too. It did take a while. But there were outlines of a booth all the way on Park Avenue. So it was a restaurant up there. So I said, well, it's got to be. So it was pretty interesting. And the old tin ceiling. And we saved that tin ceiling. And it was a drop ceiling in there. We had the raised, I don't know if y'all remember this, but the raised dining room in the dining room was called the Tulip Room. And then the big part of the restaurant was called the Clay Court, because Southeastern Clay, Stu Maurice's office, was there for years. And then Mike Holland's office, so Holland, Tulip Room, so that's how we got those names, just to share a little there. But you can see they had drop ceiling in there, and when they put the wire up for the drop ceiling, they just cut a hole in that beautiful ceiling. But we had to take a big section out for the kitchen, and we saved that, and we literally just put it right back over a hole. And then I had an automobile painter come in and paint it, spray painted it. So we saved it. Jail cell number 5. When they were renovating the city municipal building, we had not expanded yet into the big restaurant. And I walked out one day, and you had a crane going. And I saw this way up in the air, a jail cell with the door hanging out. I said, what are you going to do with that? He said, junk it. I said, I'll be right back. And I went and got my trailer, and they set it on there. And we stored it out of the barn when I still had it until we renovated. And that was jail cell number 5. And that was where Donna actually stood right here. That was where our host stand was, and that was where we sold wines. That's where we stored all the wine. So, this was during construction, as you can see, and this was 96, 95, 96. You can see all the overhead lines. So here we spent all that money, did all this beautiful stuff, and we still had those god-awful telephone poles. So fortunately, it's no longer there. There's Dad. Now, that's a good example. You see that brickwork and then that. Unfortunately, that was rotted. And over here, it was that whole thing from that pillar all the way over to that first section here. It just didn't look like one building. So we never closed during this. You know, we did the full kitchen, the dining room, and everything, and new bathrooms, and then closed down the bar and renovated that into the bar room. So it was quite a undertaking. But, and you can see our willow trees, They were that big when I planted them. And the city hated them because those roots went everywhere. But they were beautiful. And so there's my painted pillar there. But this is where Stu Maurice's office was, Southeastern Clay, and that's where Mike Holland's office was. I do remember Bob Morgan, the barber shop. He was one of our tenants for a few years. Then he moved out and moved over to Kershaw Street, I think it was. And there's Donna and I. And there's my father. Now my father rode that bike everywhere, got our meats and milk from Palace Meat Market, which was down on Park Avenue. We did use Birdsies. But this right here, see that air conditioner? That was Bob Morgan's barber shop right there. This building we called the Annex because that was our first expansion. Was we went in there because we needed more tables to serve more. If y'all could have seen my kitchen back then, it was small. It was small. And of course, Marilyn Revere, she added a lot of character to our alley. Tuck, that looks like you right there. I don't know if it is or not. I just realized that. But anyway, that's Marilyn, and with her donkey, this is when we first did the alley, the little park there. Marilyn had a lot of influence on when we expanded the restaurant to what it is today, brought a lot of horse people and with their silks and pictures and stuff, and that's how all that came about. And I returned all that when I sold it to Mellow Mushroom. West Side Bowery. People say, how? We went to a party a couple of weeks ago. It was up your alley. There was a reunion up your alley in the Bowery, and they asked me, what is a Bowery? Well, we wanted to call it, we were looking for a name of the restaurant and a corporation name. So we said, well, B Lane Corporation. B Lane Corporation was taken up because they just built the Holly House. So we couldn't use that. And it was a rough spot. It really was. So some dad, I think, came up with, well, let's call it the Bowery. And if you looked up the word Bowery in the Webster Dictionary, it said once a theatrical place on the east side of Manhattan, now full of idlers, tramps, and alcoholics. And I went, that's us. And we're on the west side of Aiken, so that's how it became West Side Bowery. But we opened in 1981. Up Your Alley opened in 82. And when they were over there renovating that building, I went, you know what? That's it. I'm going to close. They're going to take all my business. As it turned out, it was a phenomenal business. It went crazy because they had two places to choose from. It was a fun spot. I also remember when Applebee's opened on South Side, which is now Midtown, I guess. I said, well, there comes our first corporate restaurant. They're going to put us out of business. Well, that wasn't true either. So, well, Marilyn Revere, yeah. Bobby Knowles, Marilyn, Joan Tower, Donna, help me out. Dad and I would get there at 7 in the morning. The phone would start ringing. I need that table. They would fight over that table. But at first it was Marilyn's table. And I put a plaque on the wall for Marilyn. And so then Marilyn left us, and everybody fought over that table. It was unique. One thing I failed to historically, the interior of that, we always talked about that the buildings in the alley were for horses and stuff, which they actually were. There was a big piece of wood about midway that went around, all the way around every room at the restaurant. And what I was told was that was they could tether a horse. They could just put a screw eye in there and tether a horse and shoe them or do whatever. There was also in the brickwork, fairly up high, I don't know if we could see it on that one picture, but it was called soldiering, where they would stand up a brick every so often, and it would just add strength to the brick wall. So, let me see real quick if I missed anything funny. When I first opened, I would sit there and get the whole restaurant ready on Saturday. It was like hearing crickets. You could go to Lawrence Street on Saturday at 11:30, 12 o'clock and shoot a cannon and not hit anything. It was dead. Everybody went to Augusta. It was a challenge to get everybody's business back on this side of the river, but we did. Mayor Weeks, he would turn off Park Avenue because his office was on the other side of Richland, and he would always cut through the alley to B Lane at about 45 miles an hour in that Ford of his. I would have to warn customers, don't step out there real fast because the mayor might be coming down the road. When I did first walk in that building, there was a big sign on it, no liquor drinking, L-I-K-K-E-R. So I know, Linda, there's a lobster race. So you can tell, and there was Maryland's Mall there, and that was Birdsy's building. Got rid of that yellow. Up your alley. Yep. So thank you all very much.
And honestly, he has way more stories than that. I've had the opportunity to sit there while we went through photo albums and heard so many great stories. But I'm going to go back a little bit, because here's what the newspaper said. Sam Erb was the first to take the daring leap. He talks about how it was dead downtown. It was dead. And I already told you, the alley wasn't anything lively at all. To put a restaurant there was a daring leap. What he failed to tell you is he was 21 years old when he decided to do this. He had decided, in high school, that he wanted to be a restaurant owner. And this was, the $1 a year rent was what he could afford, and he and his wife and the rest of the family, it was a labor of love. They were in there doing all the work themselves to make this happen. And it did start everything on the alley. So Marilyn there, a year after Sam opened Westside Bowery, decided, let's see if we can do some stores on the alley. And that one store that I told you at the end of the alley where Taco Sushi is now, there were no storefronts on the alley. She bought the building and she cut 6 storefronts into it and said, we're going to have stores that are open onto the alley. So they had, little florist shops and knick-knack shops and everything in those stores. But the alley still looked like an alley. I mean, this is after, Sam's restaurants opened, Up Your Alley's there, Maryland shops are there. Here it is from Lawrence Street. And you saw this, there it is from the Newberry side. Here's a picture in the 1990s. The alley still really is just a little narrow byway. Cars could drive on it. There are narrow sidewalks. Here's the alley about 2000. Just doesn't look like much. There are a couple trees in it, but it also still has all the power poles. Would you want to be hanging out here? No. Look, here's what the brew pub had to work with for outdoor seating. Yeah, as cars went by and trash trucks. Well, so the city and the community actually got together and said, what's the next step for the alley? And they pulled together the money and they said, we want it to be a place where people gather. We want to make it more inviting. We want to get those utilities all underground, no more power poles. We want to make it more of a pedestrian type experience. You know, instead of having sidewalks and a street, you're going to flatten it out, put pavers in. Now, they originally were going to still allow cars to drive there. They put in all these nice brick pavers, and they allowed cars and trucks right until the day the trash truck accidentally dumped a load of really awful stuff onto it. And someone said, or maybe we can make it pedestrian only. And that's what they did. So it was a couple-year effort by an architecture firm over in Augusta, planned all this work, kept encouraging the city, came up with a lot of ideas, did some really creative things with some subsurface work so that the trees would grow well. And here's what we have now. This is what you all know, and it's hard to remember what it used to be like. But let me remind you. Then, 2 years later, look at the difference there. This, on the right-hand side, is a place to visit, a place to hang out. The left-hand side, not so much. There it is from the Lawrence Street end. I think it's the Lawrence Street end. Yeah. The narrow sidewalks and everything. Now we have that. So we have our alley today. Just more pictures. You all see this all the time. I don't need to show you that. But I want to remind you where we started. From Boneyard Alley, a true Wild West place, to the alley today, which is still like the Wild West. So, any questions for myself or for Sam? Yeah.
Where were those houses in the background?
Those were on the far side of B Lane. There were some houses there, little houses, not fancy houses. So on the east side of B Lane. B Lane didn't have all the buildings it has now. Any other questions? At least have questions for Sam. What were you thinking, Sam? The bicycle lady? Oh, yeah. Oh, I have to go back all the way through. High Wheeler? Yeah. It started out, it was built in the 1920s as a grocery warehouse, and then it kind of went through various things, but yeah, it was High Wheeler bicycle, and it had one of those high-wheeled bicycles drawn on the side. Kind of a cool place. That was before you? Yes. I'm sorry, what was that? Do you guys remember the lobster races? They were doing them just 15 years ago. I don't know why they stopped. It might have been bad for lobsters. So.
You have a lobster race started, don't
Hmm?
you? You have a lobster race started, don't you?
No, I don't know how it started. How did the lobster race start?
It started in Tom Stokes' backyard. Steve Harris' backyard.
And why? I guess it really begs the question, why was anyone racing lobsters?
There was another reason to have a party.
And that actually explains it. So then we just moved it down to the alley because that is now the prime place to have a party, right?
But it also raised $300,000 the last year they held it, and they gave it all to charity.
Wow. I think we need to bring the lobster races back. Can we start a petition tonight to bring back the lobsters?
I hadn't had one in like 7 or 8 years.
I know, it stopped before COVID. It wasn't a COVID thing. It was about 2015 it stopped. So, okay. All right, well, if there are no other questions, I will say thank you. Oh, Chris wants to talk, sorry.
I just want to thank Linda and Sam for presenting this evening. I think it was a wonderful talk. And we have 2 more of these lectures coming up in July and August, so I hope that you will register for those. And lastly, as a president of the Friends, I want to put a little plug in for the Friends. If you're not a member, we would love to have you join us in our fundraising efforts and our educational efforts. So if you're not, there's probably membership applications by the front desk on your way out. Okay? Thanks so much for coming.